Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my Vincent Price marathon. And this time I am doing a Roger Corman film, but it is not part of the Edgar Allan Poe cycle. But it did come out around the same time, and that is 1962's Tower of London, which in itself, it is not a remake or anything of Tower of London 1939 with Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff. But instead, it's more of and yeah, it's not based on Edgar Allan Poe. It's actually based on, it was supposed to be Shakespeare, but because there was a producer around that time named Eddie Small, who was really impressed by Corman's Poe films and wanted him to do a film about Richard III. But the more they talked about it, the more they didn't want to go the Shakespeare route and actually landed on Hawthorne. So I don't think it's actually based on any book by Hawthorne, but instead just more closer to his story than Shakespeare's. Which, right off the bat, Richard III, to me, is one of the most interesting figures in history, especially when looking at just really bad people, like say, you know, reading about just some of those evil people in history, not even just modern history, but even like Vlad the Impaler or like Attila the Hun or all those people. Richard III isn't quite up to that, but he is a Shakespearean villain. I mean, he's a real life person, but like Lawrence Oliver's 1955 film that he wrote, directed, and starred in as King Richard III. One of the greatest villains, most just cunning, charming, just deceptive, just ruthless villains I think ever put on film. They kind of go that route. They even have like the shoulder length Lord Farquaad hair, because that's what King Richard looked like. But yeah, they didn't really go full on Shakespeare, but I did like this film. It's also it's like if you just take the general consensus of like King Richard III of France and Shakespeare's Macbeth, is basically this, because it focuses more on the haunting guilt of killing for power, which he kills his brother in this, like King Richard did, but he's haunted by his vision of him and the guilt of it all. So it's actually more like Macbeth than Shakespeare's King Richard. I like how it's shot in black and white, which kind of gives it that Raging Bull, Schindler's List, even though it's not to that caliber of film that those two are, but like history being put in black and white, it just helps fit the aesthetic more. But I really like the costumes and the set design. I mean, it really fits 1483 England. And I say King Richard III of France. That's fucking stupid. I meant England. I don't know why I said France. But, King or Richard, who's actually the Duke of Gloucester, is upset that his dying brother Edward IV left their other brother George to be the protector of his sons and the king. So he kills him and then takes the power for himself. And it even just shows like how he intimidates, and it it's a historical film, but like where the 39 film where Rathbone plays Richard and Karloff plays an executioner. I think that's more of the historical drama, which this also is, but it just has more emphasis on horror. Probably because that's what Corman was doing at the time, and Vincent Price is Vincent Price. Which again, another knockout performance by Price. Just he never, he does a good job at just being just that. He even, there's even some scenes with the Laurence Olivier just kind of cunning. He does that, but he also does like the terrified, haunted, guilt-ridden king. And he's also haunted by other ghosts. Like a Mistress Shore, who he intimidates her because that was his dying brother's wife. He intimidates her into claiming that the dead king's children are illegitimate, so he tortures her. He tortured her on the rack, actually. And I just watched this the other night for the first time. He had her in another contraption, but then he puts her on the rack and she dies. Which then he says he executed her for spreading the rumor that children were illegitimate. So he always has these ways to justify what he's doing, and he always has like a plan B. Or maybe not really plan B. He probably had, well, yeah, it was, because he wanted her to say it first. And, it goes back and forth between, him being the ruthless leader and him being the fearful, haunted by ghosts and how wrong he's done. And, I'm not going to go over every little thing like I normally do. I'm kind of trying to shorten my videos up a bit. But, I saw it really, really late the other night, so I'm kind of fuzzy on the ending because I was starting to fall asleep. Not because it's boring, because it's not. But, by the end, he's finally crowned. But, and, he goes with an army to this other village. And then Richard declares that they'll fight. And, this other person he's with advises him to leave. But he's convinced that he's invincible at this point just because of everything that's happened. And he's basically left alone. And his army's been defeated. And then the ghosts of his victims appear. And they attempt to fight him. And these other people watch as he fights air. He just swats and swings at nothing. So I think it's safe to say by this point he's pretty much been driven insane by his own guilt. He tries to get on his horse, but he's killed with a battle axe that's held by a ghostly soldier. So even then, it ends kind of like in real life when he was killed on a battlefield. Obviously, done in a horror story way. It's definitely different, especially for the time it came out, for what both Price and Corman were doing. I do like historical films, not just ones of people that I'm into, but just, I like um, medieval stuff as well. Not a whole lot, not like of Middle Earth high fantasy stuff. I have a hard time getting into that. That's why I haven't even seen Lord of the Rings. I know. But King Richard is one of my favorite historical and literary characters, especially villains. So it was cool to see Price play him. I know I haven't really gone in depth, but there's not really a whole lot to say about it otherwise if I don't go start to finish of everything that happens, which I'm trying to cut down on. But I do like the black and white. The set design and the costumes are pretty well done, especially for the budget, which I believe. I mean, it was shot in 15 days. Francis Ford Coppola was the dialogue director. And I think some of the exteriors was used for something else, which is common for Corman. But yeah, Price liked it. He liked his performance. Corman always thought the film was not bad. Is it my favorite of the ones they've done together? No, but it's definitely different. And if you're a history buff and you think that you're gonna get like a good historical piece, you'll probably be disappointed. But I love the story of Richard III. I love Vincent Price, and I think it was a perfect time to make that kind of movie because it did feel like one of their Poe films. It's got like that gothic tragedy around it, but centered around the actual villain. Like, the villain is also the protagonist and antagonist. There's a word for that. I can't remember what it is. But, yeah. Sorry I didn't go too in-depth with it, but, I don't know. I felt like I would have just been given a history lesson with ghosts. But Roger Corman and Vincent Price's 1962 Tower of London, I really enjoyed it. Again, it's different. Know what you're getting into before you see it. I've always been interested in Richard III, so I liked it. But Tower of London. And I've still got a few Vincent Price films to go. I'm going to try to get those done. But anyway, thank you for watching.